everyone. So it's awesome. We now have a lidded form, but my lidded form looks just like your lidded form, and our lidded forms look just like our neighbor's lidded forms. So let's change that. Let's do something so we can add our own personality, our own individual character, our own vision to the surface of our pieces. For this project, I'm going to show you how to decorate using the technique called applique. In our case, that means we are going to take a piece made from clay and attach it to our form, which is also made from clay. So you want to make sure your form is still leather hard. If it has started to change color and started to lighten up and become a little bit chalky, that means it's going bone dry. So this technique will not work for you. So you do need your form to still be leather hard. So there's a few different approaches you can take to this decorating technique. So I'm going to show you some of them now. So let's get started. You could make some parts from a slab, and it could really be anything. You could cut out triangles, you could cut out circles, you could cut out strips of clay. Really, you have a lot of options when it comes to decorating the surface of your piece. Go online and research some imagery. So I just printed off some basic flower shapes. I just did a internet search where I just typed in flower templates and got some print off. I'm just putting this piece of paper down. I'm using a ballpoint pen and I'm tracing the flower, and it's leaving me the indentation of the flower on my slab. I did the same shape but in different sizes. Then I'm just gonna cut them out with my X-Acto. So you can see this is still quite soft clay. It's very flexible. I'm able to bend it without it cracking or breaking. So the moisture level that exists in this is different than the moisture level that exists in my lidded form. I'm gonna keep my lidded form covered for now so it doesn't get any more dry. I like to cut on newspaper. You can see I can then hold the blade with one hand and rotate the clay on the newspaper. Now, like I said, you could do this with any shape that you want. So I could just go ahead and trace this with my needle tool and score, add a little slip and attach this. But like I said, this clay is quite a bit wetter than this clay. So I would want to score, add slip, score and add a little more slip to get this clay a little more moist and tender before I attach this. I'm not so interested in just attaching this flat floral shape. I want to give it some more dimension. So to do that, I'm going to just start cleaning this up with my red rib. I'm compressing into the creases where I cut in for the petal, because I have noticed when this flower starts to dry, sometimes it wants to continue to crack where you came in. And this is also going to start to shape this and give it a bit more of a round look than a flat look. And then, because this is quite thick, I'm also going to squeeze a little bit, especially out at the ends, to make the flower a little bit thinner and more delicate towards the outside. My clay has a lot of grog in it. I try not to clean so much with my sponge because that brings a lot of that grog and texture to the surface. Okay, now I'm going to just take my thumb and I'm just starting to pinch this clay and thin it out. Okay, so I've cleaned up, thinned out, and rounded these floral shapes a bit more. but I'd like to do something else to make them have a bit more dimension. I have a piece of foam here, and I've placed a piece of thin plastic on it. That's just because I work with a lot of different clay bodies, mainly porcelain, and I want to keep my supplies free of any of these more iron-rich clay body colors. So now I have some of these shapes. They were just thrown solid and bisqued. Some, like this one, was actually supposed to be the cork for a bottle, but it works really great for pressing in to these shapes. So I'm gonna just find the center, and I'm gonna push down and roll. And you can see that just pops this flower right up. So now I've gone from something very flat to something that has a nice curve and more dimension. So I do like to go back in and check these creases after I press the flower, just to make sure no cracks came out, because I do find that when I press to reshape, that occasionally that will want to crack right there. And now I'm just gonna let this set aside till it stiffens up just a little bit, so it becomes closer to the moisture level of my lidded form. Let's try another one of these shapes. So this one has a bit of a point on it. So I'm gonna place that point about in the center. Just roll this. And then you can see it just lifts that shape up, makes it have a lot more dimension. So I do have some flowers that I created earlier. So they've had a little time to set up, so they are closer to the moisture level of my lidded form. So I'm gonna go ahead and get them attached. I'm gonna need my slip and a scoring tool, and I'm gonna decide my composition and where I would like to place some of these. I could do one of the smaller ones where the notch is if I want to. One thing I want to avoid doing is attaching anything right on my seam where my lid is attached to my body. Just gonna remove the lid for now. And I'm gonna lay this flower down, taking my needle tool. I am just gonna do a light trace around where I want it to go. I'm gonna score in that area. And I am gonna over score, like score a little bit farther. Add some slip. I'm gonna score a little bit more in that space after I added the slip. I'm gonna score the bottom of my flower, add some slip, score that again. Now I am going to place my flower onto my form and push and kind of wiggle it back and forth so I can be sure that score lines I've created have really locked into one another, and compressing to make sure that has really attached nice and securely. Trace around where I want it to go, score that area. So I'm making X's crisscross, add a little slip. I'm gonna score the bottom of the flower, add a little slip. Because these are drier pieces of clay, that's why I score, add a little slip, and then score again. I'm just trying to work that slip down a little bit farther to get this area a little more moist so I can get a better attachment. At this point, your box is stiff enough that you shouldn't have to worry about supporting on the inside, but I do like to still place my opposite hand on the inside and support that inside wall when I'm applying pressure down. To clean up around my flowers, I'll usually just take another brush and just run it around to push some of that slip in and clean that up. We've got some flowers on our piece, so we can decide, do we want to add more flowers? Do we want to add maybe some stems? We can think about what we may want to put on the top of our form for our finial. Do we want to add another flower as our finial, also known as a knob, to help us lift our lid off. Do we want to create a different shape for our finial? I made this little bird. That could go on there. This bird is solid, so I would want to go up in and gut a little of the weight of the bird out, just because you do want to be careful when you are doing your applique. You wouldn't want to take a big hunk of clay and just score and attach it to your form. You want to find a way to build that's going to allow your piece to be successful all the way through both of the firings. Taking something like this solid and just attaching it on is a pretty big chunk of clay that's going to dry considerably slower than this thinner slab. So if you wanted to add, let's say, this big block of clay, it would be a good idea to come into it and carve out the interior. Then you have less clay and the thickness starts to be closer to the thickness of your lidded form. So their compatibility is just going to be stronger. So now you have the same shape, but it is no longer a solid mass of clay. It has now been gutted out. So these walls all the way around are very similar thickness to your form. So this bird is also solid. So I would want to do the same thing. Decide kind of where I might attach this. And I'm going to tap it to create a flat spot. So this is a very similar technique to the cut and gut project or the solid construction project that I have a video for on my YouTube station, where you're able to sculpt things solidly to help you get the proportions, and then you gut them out so you can get a uniform thickness without having just a solid mass of clay. So I do like to get in there and compress that inside as well, so that wall is nice and compressed on the inside of this form. I could attach a little bird finial if I would like. It's a good idea to plan out your applique and your finial shape or your knob shape so that everything has a relationship. So you really want to plan your composition. You have a bug theme. Maybe you're going to have a giant cockroach as your finial. Maybe you did a house, so you want to make a roof on the top of your form. So something that relates in some way. If you did want to attach this block of clay, I just quickly cut off my brick of clay and carved out to show you as an example, or this bird as a finial. When you go to attach this, you are going to have trapped air where this bird attaches to your form. I am going to want to take my needle tool and just make one hole right from the lid up into the internal cavity of this where it has attached to your form. By making that one hole through your lid into the internal chamber of the bird or the block, you have released any trapped air. Therefore, you have taken out the risk of this piece wanting to blow up or crack off during the firings. So just do that one little hole. That's all you need, just a needle tool hole. You can also add fresh, soft clay right from your bag directly to your clay form as well. To increase your success when taking leather hard clay and soft clay and putting them together, you just want to tender up this area a little bit more. So I am scoring, I'm adding some slip, then I scored again, I'm adding a little more slip. Because this clay is soft and fresh right out of the bag, I do not need to score and slip it. I can just attach it right to my slab. You do still want to make sure you really compress it down. You have to make sure you compress the applique. Whatever you're attaching together, you need to make sure that it's compressed and secured to the form you're attaching it to. You don't want to just lay it on there. Just because you scored and slipped, if you just lay it on there, the chances of it wanting to separate are much higher if you do not come in and compress. Scored well, slipped well, and compressed all of your attachments onto your leather hard piece, because remember we had the softer clay and the much drier clay. After this sets a little bit more, you can keep coming in here and cleaning this up and making it a little smoother and more refined. So once you're finished with your lidded form, you want to go ahead and take some plastic, parachute it over, and dry your forms nice and slow. Keep an eye on your attachments. If you see any cracking that appears around where you attached your applique to your form, you can go in with a wooden tool and burnish all the way up to the point of it being bone dry. That will just help minimize any cracking that may want to happen while it's drying, and then also through the firing processes. Okay, so that's it. That's applique. Have a super fun time decorating your surfaces and making them stand apart and unique to you. Happy creating. Bye.